This woman was the one who was hit by Maxwell Gray. She was the 1,000-year-old snake demon Evangelina White that Ruby Reed mentioned. In Evangelina White's mind, memories appeared before she fell into a coma. Before she fell into a coma, she was surrounded by 2 people and injured. Finally, at the critical moment, she risked her life and was injured, tearing through space and escaping here, just in time to meet her. Maxwell Gray, taken to the hospital by Maxwell Gray's men. Just as Evangelina White was rearranging her thoughts, a pair of footsteps approached from far away. Evangelina White slowly turned her head and looked towards the person who came. This was an extremely handsome man. Even if you used the eyes of a monster to judge, it could still be called a superior appearance. Moreover, this person had a special aura, like a fairy, but also like a demon. Is there anything unusual about this person? Evangelina White secretly examined Maxwell Gray, but did not discover anything suspicious. This person is indeed human. Evangelina White didn't understand in her heart, for more than 1,000 years, she had never encountered such a thing, but the fairy energy on the other person's body was useful in healing her wounds, and it would most likely help her. We go one step further, a qualitative change occurs. This is what every demon dreams of. Evangelina White immediately decided to first hide next to the other person, thinking of a way to take the fairy weapon from the other person and take it as her own. Maxwell Gray quietly looked at Evangelina White, his eyes were a little impatient. He thought he could use money to solve everything, but he didn't expect such an incident to happen. He didn't like this feeling of being out of control. The doctor said you hit your head and temporarily lost your memory. Furthermore, your leg bone is cracked and you need to rest. Maxwell Gray spoke, his tone calm, without any emotion. Evangelina White looked at Maxwell Gray blankly, with confusion and incomprehension in her eyes. After a long while, she slowly opened her mouth. Who are you? Maxwell Gray's temples twitched. Very good, the answer was very accurate for someone with amnesia, since the other person couldn't remember anything, and couldn't directly use money to solve it, he still had some conscience. I will arrange a place for you to live, arrange someone to take care of you, until you recover. Maxwell Gray said. Evangelina White secretly smiled when she heard that. This was exactly what she wanted, but her face still had that stupid look. Maxwell Gray saw this and didn't want to stay long. If someone else saw such a beauty, they would most likely feel pity. Unfortunately, he wouldn't. At this age, he only met the woman. That's what made him lose his temper. Thinking of Elena Rivers, Maxwell Gray couldn't help but curl the corner of his lips, as if he needed to quickly tie her to his side, to avoid her being disturbed by the obnoxious flies, which he didn't allow others to look at when he saw them. I'll go first, you rest well. Maxwell Gray left this dry sentence behind, without turning around and leaving. Evangelina White looked at the back of Maxwell Gray leaving, angrily gritted her teeth, saying in all these years, she has never been looked down upon like this man is really too hateful. Evangelina White silently vowed that one day, she would make him kneel at her feet, begging her to take a look at him. On the other side, Elena Rivers had eaten her fill and was about to get a good night's sleep, but she felt a demon approaching Maxwell Gray. Just as she was about to go take a look, that feeling disappeared. Elena Rivers wrinkled her small nose in displeasure. This guy is so annoying, it's not Tang Tang, why are there so many monsters targeting him, so hateful? Wanting to ignore the other person's life or death, but not being able to bear it, Elena Rivers was extremely confused. Elena Rivers suddenly lay face down on the bed, pulled the blanket over her head, rolled back and forth on the bed, muttering, "Don't care, just sleep." Venting her anger for a while, Elena Rivers gradually fell asleep. Early the next morning, the sunlight shined through the window, illuminating the white legs even more shiny, and the owner of those legs hugged the blanket and slept soundly, looking at that naked jade body. It was truly charming. People. A shrill sound from the doorbell broke the morning's quiet. The person on the bed mumbled a few dissatisfied words, turned over, and continued to sleep. The person ringing the doorbell seemed to be confronting the person in the house. He kept ringing the doorbell and never let go, the shrill sound of the doorbell ringing endlessly in his ears. Finally, Elena Rivers was awakened in bed, suddenly jumped up from the bed, jumped down, strode to the door, suddenly opened the door, without caring who was outside, scolded, "You bastard is free. Don't you have anything to do? Why are you ringing that damn doorbell so early in the morning?" Maxwell Gray stood at the door looking at the sleepy Elena Rivers, her long legs clearly visible, her eyes darkened, thinking that there were still bodyguards following behind, and quickly ordered, "Go back." Then he conveniently took the bag from a bodyguard's hand, pushed Elena Rivers into the door, then followed and conveniently closed the door. The bodyguards at the door still stood with expressionless faces, but unfortunately the twitching corners of their mouths revealed their true thoughts. "What do you want to do?" "There's nothing to do in the morning. If you don't sleep, I still want to sleep." Elena Rivers clearly saw the person coming and became even more angry. It was this guy who made her sleep so late last night, yet he still came to ring the doorbell so early in the morning. It was so hateful. Elena Rivers didn't pay attention. Out of anger, her chest rose and fell, creating a beautiful scene. It's a pity that she didn't pay attention. It doesn't mean that Maxwell Gray didn't pay attention. Men are very sensitive to these things. Maxwell Gray looked at the cherry lips that kept opening and closing, suddenly reached out and pushed, pressing Elena Rivers against the wall, then quickly bowed his head, using his lips to block Elena Rivers's small lips. Elena Rivers did not expect Maxwell Gray to suddenly attack. She was unable to react and just looked at Maxwell Gray in bewilderment. Maxwell Gray took advantage of Elena Rivers's daze and quickly deepened the kiss, leading Elena Rivers to dance. At the same time, Maxwell Gray's hands also began to feel restless. His emotions were still as good as in memory. Maxwell Gray's eyes became even darker. Elena Rivers, who was stunned, felt something, and finally reluctantly regained her reason, suddenly used force to push Maxwell Gray away, her face red. Elena Rivers's heart ached. How could this guy treat her like that, even though the two of them had already taken their relationship a step further, but that was when she was in a coma. This time, she was awake. "You scoundrel, you bastard, you bastard." Elena Rivers was so angry that her speech became confused. Maxwell Gray stuck out his tongue and licked his lips, looking unsatisfied. "Very sweet, I like it very much." These words from Maxwell Gray completely ignited Elena Rivers' gunpowder. Elena Rivers jumped up and rushed towards Maxwell Gray. Maxwell Gray was momentarily caught off guard and was pinned to the ground by Elena Rivers. Elena Rivers rode on Maxwell Gray, punching down with her two small fists, shouting, "You rotten scoundrel, you damn scoundrel, beat you to death, rotten scoundrel, let's see if you dare to do it again next time. Actually, do you think this lady is easy to bully? If you bully her once, she dares to bully her a second time. She doesn't get angry. Do you think I'm a sick cat?" Elena Rivers's two small fists did not cause any injury to Maxwell Gray. On the contrary, his eyes became even darker, with a vague fire burning. In fact, Elena Rivers was just angry, with no intention of harming Maxwell Gray, otherwise she could have taken it with a direct attack. Maxwell Gray's little life, she just wanted to vent her anger. Elena Rivers finished venting her anger, fiercely glared at Maxwell Gray, and raised her small fist to threaten, "Say, next time you dare any more." Maxwell Gray groaned, holding Elena Rivers's small waist with both hands. "I've already eaten, what's wrong with just one kiss? After all, it's mine." Elena Rivers saw Maxwell Gray but didn't know repenting. She raised her fist to strike down. She immediately felt. Before she had eaten pork, she saw the pig running away, not to mention how many years Elena Rivers had been wandering around the underworld. How could she not understand this? "What is the matter? You scoundrel." It took Elena Rivers a long time to say this sentence. "I'm just joking with you," Maxwell Gray said with an evil smile. "Bastard." Elena Rivers really doesn't know how to scold people, repeating the same words over and over again. If you don't wake up, I can't guarantee that I won't do something more despicable. Maxwell Gray's eyes were filled with anger. If it weren't for an important guest to meet this morning, he would definitely take this opportunity to go one step further and demand more. The days are long and the days are wide, there will always be opportunities in the future, there is no need to rush for the moment, Maxwell Gray comforted himself, at the same time adjusting his breathing, to calm himself down. Elena Rivers jumped up quickly, as if her butt was on fire. Maxwell Gray lay on the ground again for a while, until he confirmed that he had calmed down, then slowly got up, brushed off his dust-free clothes, picked up the clothes that fell at his feet, and gave them to Elena Rivers. Change. What is it? Elena Rivers stood from afar, sticking her head out and looking into the bag, wanting to see what was in the bag. Clothes. Maxwell Gray is still as economical as gold. Why do we have to change clothes? I wear this very well. Elena Rivers pulled the blue dress that was wrinkled by Maxwell Gray and said dissatisfiedly. Maxwell Gray evaluated Elena Rivers. Indeed, as Elena Rivers said, she was very suitable for blue clothes, which was a simple dress worn on her body, but it stood out like that. It's just that she is like that, she belongs to him alone, she can't be seen by others, so she has to change her clothes. Change clothes. Maxwell Gray is very persistent. Based on what? You told me to change and I changed right away. Are you sick? Come to the door early in the morning, just to tell me to change clothes. What clothes I wear has nothing to do with you, I don't change, you what can I do? Elena Rivers's stubborn personality emerged. If she said she wouldn't cooperate, she wouldn't cooperate. You change it yourself, or I help you change it, 2 options, I'll say it first, if it's me who changes it, I can't guarantee what will happen. Maxwell Gray threatened. Honestly, I'd be happy to help. You dare. Do you want to try and see if I dare? Maxwell Gray's eyes looked very dangerous, no one would doubt whether he dared or not at this time. Elena Rivers glared at Maxwell Gray, thinking about a solution. Looking at Maxwell Gray's appearance, she would definitely say yes, she didn't want to let this guy change her clothes. But coming to Maxwell Gray's company as an assistant, it's not like you have to meet this guy every day, which is also what Elena Rivers doesn't want. Just when Elena Rivers was in a dilemma, she remembered that yesterday she sensed a demon approaching Maxwell Gray twice. If she became Maxwell Gray's assistant, she would be able to take this opportunity to investigate the demon. Who the hell is, then eliminate this danger. Although Maxwell Gray is a bit obnoxious at times, for some reason, Elena Rivers does not have the heart to ignore the other person's life or death. Give it here. Elena Rivers walked over, grabbed the bag from Maxwell Gray's hand, then turned around and walked towards the bedroom. After entering, she did not forget to lock the bedroom door, fearing that this Maxwell Gray would attack her. When she changed clothes, she took the opportunity to come in. A few minutes later, Elena Rivers changed her clothes and came out, pulling her skirt as she walked, quite uncomfortable. Although this set of clothes is a brand name, the quality is guaranteed, but the style is very rustic, the suit is pure black, the style is conservative, the skirt is 10 centimeters below the knee, it looks very unsightly, and it is also unsightly to wear. Why did you choose this outfit? It's so ugly. Elena Rivers complained dissatisfiedly. Is it ugly? I can see it. Maxwell Gray nodded with satisfaction. This outfit was specially prepared by Maxwell Gray for Elena Rivers. He deliberately chose such a conservative and rustic style, just to hide Elena Rivers' beauty and not let others see. Although Elena Rivers was born beautiful, she was still very beautiful even when dressed like that, but compared to the dress just now, this one was much better, he was very satisfied. What kind of aesthetic is yours? I don't like it. I want to change it to something else. Wearing a suit is already a concession for her. Even if she wears it, she must wear something that looks pretty. Don't think she doesn't know, she often sees women wearing beautiful suits. Maxwell Gray raised his hand to look at his watch. There's no time left, let's do it. After speaking, he pulled Elena Rivers' hand and walked towards the door. Half an hour later, the two got off the bus in front of a tall skyscraper. This is your company? So high. Elena Rivers looked up and saw that her neck was a bit tired. More than 100 floors, that's not considered high. Maxwell Gray directly pulled Elena Rivers forward, not caring at all about the commotion he would cause by doing so. Elena Rivers also didn't realize there was anything wrong with this. At first she was a little unfamiliar with Maxwell Gray holding her hand, but after a few times she got used to it. As soon as the two entered the hall, they immediately became the center of everyone's attention. The employees who were hastily clocking time saw the boss known as the Iceberg, but he was holding a woman's hand and boldly walked in. They gasped in surprise and widened their eyes, as if they saw an alien planet. Perhaps seeing aliens is not as shocking as this scene. Elena Rivers also noticed everyone's eyes on her, but she had long gotten used to being the center of attention, so she didn't see anything wrong. Hello CEO. Someone responded first, greeting Maxwell Gray. Maxwell Gray nodded slightly, pulling Elena Rivers straight to the president's private elevator. Waiting for the figures of Maxwell Gray and Elena Rivers to disappear from everyone's sight, the hall immediately erupted. A female receptionist hugged her chest, looked miserable, and said to her colleague next to her, "How could this be possible? How could our handsome CEO hold a woman's hand to come to the company? Oh my God. Oh, it's so terrible, I must have seen it wrong, I definitely saw it wrong, our president will absolutely not do such a thing." Her colleague also looked heartbroken. The CEO was the white prince in the hearts of company women, the ideal husband candidate, who could accept this truth. My dream is broken. Another receptionist looked resentfully at the elevator door closing. When everyone comes back to their senses, the first thing is to pick up the communication device next to them and send this shocking news to their colleagues in the company. If they are not afraid of being discovered by the CEO, these people will definitely go directly. Post this news on the company intranet. It only took 5 short minutes for the entire company up and down to know this shocking news. In the blink of an eye, the employees who usually moved quickly between offices disappeared, everyone huddled together in 3 groups. A group, 5 people per group, talking about this new rumor. If Maxwell Gray knew that his actions caused the company's employees' performance to seriously decline, I don't know what he would think. Elena Rivers for the first time stepping into Maxwell Gray's office, he was shocked by everything in front of him. The entire 100th floor is open, except for the secretary's room at the entrance, all the remaining space belongs to Maxwell Gray. This is a space that integrates entertainment, work and rest. In addition to the separate rooms, other places are connected, just cleverly divided by large furniture into each area. Independence. As soon as you enter the door, the first thing that catches your eye is a living room. The interior decoration is bold with ancient features but does not lose modern elements, pure white genuine leather sofa and purple sandalwood tea table. Handicrafts placed next to each other, so harmonious. Next to it is a bookshelf displaying very expensive-looking antiques, on the other side hang a dozen potted plants hanging down, forming a natural green curtain. Obscure what's behind. Going around the potted plants, the first thing that catches your eye is the working area. This area uses white and black as the main colors, simple, spacious, with tables and chairs arranged and a long shag carpet spread on the floor, looking very simple. But all are high-end products, expressing luxury in a discreet way. In addition to these, there is also a cinema room, a game room, a rest room, and even a solarium. After Maxwell Gray took Elena Rivers on a tour, he smiled and looked at Elena Rivers and asked, "How are you satisfied? If you're not satisfied, just say so and I'll let someone exchange it." "Okay, I didn't expect that even though you're not good, your taste is not bad. Can I take this as you praising me?" Maxwell Gray feels helpless. This little girl always likes to oppose me, even when she compliments me, she doesn't forget to criticize me first. but why do I have a strange feeling towards this little girl? Is it possible? I have a tendency to be mistreated. If you want to think like that, I have no opinion. Elena Rivers shrugged indifferently, then took the opportunity to lie down on the white sofa, lying sideways on the sofa, lazily looking at Maxwell Gray. What are you going to let me do? I'll say it first, I've never been a secretary or assistant, I'm not familiar with this field, it can be said that I don't know anything. Looking at Elena Rivers's appearance, just frankly saying that I'm not suitable here, you let me go. The suggestion was so obvious, how could Maxwell Gray not see it? Unfortunately he had already made up his mind, it would not be easy to change. Elena Rivers's little plan would definitely fail. You just need to stay here, let me feel your breath in this space, and do whatever you want here, it's up to you. Maxwell Gray declared. Maxwell Gray does not rely on Elena Rivers to help him with his work. He has no shortage of employees. Even if there is a shortage, as long as he is willing to spend money, someone will naturally find the right person to help him. That's why he must letting Elena Rivers come to his company to work, just wanted to keep Elena Rivers by his side, so that he could have more time to interact with her, and also be able to grasp her every move. Elena Rivers gave Maxwell Gray a feeling like an illusory wind, making Maxwell Gray feel insecure, always feeling that the next moment she would disappear, so he used this method to tie Elena Rivers to his side. To avoid Elena Rivers from disappearing again. Oh, I know, okay, then I'll go get some sleep first. Elena Rivers was beyond Maxwell Gray's expectations, her expression was very calm. Maxwell Gray didn't know, the reason why Elena Rivers acted so calm was because these constraints for her were basically nothing. If she wanted to go, 10 Maxwell Grays couldn't stop her. 2 minutes later, Maxwell Gray looked at the closed bedroom door and smiled. Anyway, she didn't refuse to stay by his side, which was good. This sleep of Elena Rivers lasted until about 11 o'clock in the morning before she woke up. Elena Rivers walked out of the room sleepily and immediately saw Maxwell Gray hard at work. In his left hand, Maxwell Gray holds a file of documents, in his right hand he holds a pen, reading and underlining things with the pen, occasionally frowning and thinking. For a moment, he was so serious, the sunlight shone on his serious face, dying at a strange halo. Elena Rivers suddenly felt that the man in front of her eyes gave her a dazzling feeling, so the saying that serious men are the most handsome is true, not a fabrication. Suddenly, the phone next to Maxwell Gray rang. Maxwell Gray conveniently answered the phone, listened for a while, then thought for a moment, each command was immediately given, his tone was decisive and steadfast, without any strings attached. It's so long-winded, just hearing it makes people want to believe it. Elena Rivers stood next to her, leaning against the door, looking at her, but at some point she became stunned. Suddenly, Maxwell Gray suddenly raised his head to look at Elena Rivers, slightly raised the corner of his mouth, and gave a slight smile. Are you satisfied with what you see? Elena Rivers secretly scolded herself and said, okay, better than a gigolo at a bar. I think if you become a gigolo, you will definitely become a diamond-class gigolo. Maxwell Gray's eyes flashed, daring to compare him to a prostitute. Over the years, only she had dared to do that to herself. So will you come support then? Maxwell Gray asked. Such a question made Elena Rivers stunned. Such a question was not what Maxwell Gray would ask. Based on the time she observed Maxwell Gray, he should have been angry at this time, but this time he was not. He appeared very calm. But Elena Rivers quickly regained her composure and replied casually, is there a discount? If there is a discount, I can consider it. No need to discount, forever free for you, always willing to serve you. Maxwell Gray's eyes were very sharp, those eyes were like a hunter staring at his prey, the aggression in his eyes was exposed, not hidden at all. Stop it, they all say cheap things are good things. Not only are you cheap, you're also free, not even a good product. This lady is very picky and doesn't appreciate poor quality goods like you. Elena Rivers took the opportunity to scold Maxwell Gray, fully demonstrating what it means to scold someone without using vulgar words. "What do you say? I'm a poor quality product. You're the first person who dares to say that to me." Maxwell Gray's eyes narrowed slightly, his eyes flashed, and the meaning of threat was very strong. If it were someone else, he would definitely be scared by Maxwell Gray's eyes. Unfortunately, Maxwell Gray is facing Elena Rivers. Who is Elena Rivers? She is someone who grew up in hell. What evil has she never seen before? In her eyes, Maxwell Gray is just a vegetable, not even an onion. "Don't look at me like that, what I said is the truth. Speaking the truth requires courage these days." The truth? If I remember correctly, someone just used it not long ago. Don't you think it's a bit hypocritical to say these things now? Maxwell Gray said coldly. Any man cannot stand being looked down upon by women, let alone Maxwell Gray, a man who stands at the top of society and is used to being arrogant. Elena Rivers' words, in Maxwell Gray's eyes, were a challenge to his authority. If necessary, he wouldn't hesitate to give this girl with a manly mouth and a belly full of daggers a little lesson. Maxwell Gray has absolute confidence in his appearance, physique and some skills, absolutely not as bad as Elena Rivers said. Maxwell Gray didn't say anything. As soon as he spoke, he aroused Elena Rivers's repressed anger. Regarding the accident that night, Elena Rivers did not care much on the outside, but in her heart she still cared. After all, it was her first time, the first time for any woman. We're all very special, but her first time disappeared while she didn't know anything, and after that she had no memory of that night. It was such a failure, there was no happiness or romance left. The passion of the first time. Elena Rivers always advised herself to just treat it as if she was bitten by a dog. After all, if the dog bit her once, she couldn't bite her back. But this guy Maxwell Gray was asked for a ferry by an elephant, and even brought up what happened that night. This time Elena Rivers got angry. The so-called uncle can handle it, and can't. Can't stand it anymore, no need to hold it anymore, Elena Rivers exploded. "Shut up, if you dare mention that night again, I'll hit you." Elena Rivers threatened fiercely, not forgetting to swing her small fist to scare Maxwell Gray. Unfortunately, her small white fist did not pose any threat to Maxwell Gray. Her movements did not far from being scary, on the contrary, it's a bit adorable. If Elena Rivers knew what Maxwell Gray was thinking at this time, she would definitely not say a word, hit and say, "This guy is born with itchy skin that deserves to be hit." She is helping him. What I said is the truth. Maxwell Gray was not intimidated at all, and deliberately pronounced each word very clearly, fearing that Elena Rivers wouldn't hear clearly. "I told you to shut up, didn't you hear? This shameless guy still has the face to mention what happened that night. If it weren't for you taking advantage of my coma to attack me, how could it have succeeded?" Elena Rivers shouted angrily. "Don't talk like I'm bullying you. Don't forget, that night we stayed in the same room in the hotel, although I forgot how I got there, but if you also followed me, you should know what would happen. What will happen, if a woman and a man enter a hotel and open a room, just normal women will know." Maxwell Gray was also a little angry. He always thought that what happened that night was a mutual love affair, water flowing into a river, and the goodness that night made him remember forever, becoming a good memory. But what came out of Elena Rivers' mouth that night was completely degenerate. Such a result made Maxwell Gray very dissatisfied. He is Maxwell Gray. Whenever he lacks a woman, he has to use force. He only needs to say a word to a woman, and all kinds of beauties rush to his head to chase him away. Yet only this woman didn't like him, avoided him like the devil, and talked like that night, which made Maxwell Gray really angry. Hearing that, Elena Rivers choked, because she really couldn't find any words to refute. That night she actually took the initiative to lead Maxwell Gray to the hotel. But she did so because she wanted to help Maxwell Gray. Who would have thought that because of that, she would lose both the lead and the fishing line? This matter she could not say, because this matter related to the underworld, she could not arbitrarily reveal it. Moreover, Such a thing is too strange. Even if she said it, a typical atheist like Maxwell Gray would not believe it, and would probably even look at her with crazy eyes. Knowing clearly that there would be no good outcome, Elena Rivers was too lazy to explain, only blaming herself for being too careless and having accidentally encountered such a thing. Why, there's nothing more to say. Seeing that Elena Rivers did not speak up, Maxwell Gray still did not give up, and deliberately talked to provoke Elena Rivers. Elena Rivers was stimulated by Maxwell Gray's words and couldn't help but argue. You have nothing to say. That night I was in a coma, I don't know anything, you tell me what to say. Oh, so I don't remember. Why did I say that I don't trust my ability like that? It turns out I don't remember at all. I can guarantee, if you have memories of that night, you will definitely be very satisfied at my service. Maxwell Gray spoke firmly. Humph, arrogant, crazy, narcissistic, I've met many men, but I've never seen anyone as thick-faced as you. I'm embarrassed for you. Elena Rivers glanced at Maxwell Gray. Busy criticizing Maxwell Gray, Elena Rivers did not notice that Maxwell Gray took advantage of her inattention and moved to her side, also not paying attention to the dangerous breath emanating around Maxwell Gray's body. Is that so? It seems you really don't remember, that's why I think like that. I think it's necessary. Maxwell Gray deliberately stopped after saying this, looking at Elena Rivers with a profound and unfathomable expression. What is necessary? Elena Rivers asked directly. After finishing asking, she raised her head to see Maxwell Gray right in front of her eyes. Realizing that the situation was not good, it was too late to step back. Maxwell Gray took advantage of Elena Rivers being caught off guard, holding Elena Rivers's waist with one hand, pulling her into his arms, then holding Elena Rivers's waist with both hands, to prevent Elena Rivers from escaping. Maxwell Gray knows that Elena Rivers is a bit strange. To ensure that Elena Rivers cannot turning into that transparent barrier, separating the two of them, Maxwell Gray pressed the two of them close together, with almost no gap at all. Maxwell Gray's tall and strong physique, Elena Rivers's bulging body, these two seemingly different bodies, when pressed together, fit so well, as if they were made for each other. Maxwell Gray's eyes looking at Elena Rivers became even deeper. Deep in the depths of his eyes there was a burning fire of desire. Since that night, he had always thought back. At this moment he hugged Elena Rivers in his arms, Maxwell Gray's body immediately the honest reaction to what was in his heart. Maxwell Gray's voice also became low and hoarse. It is necessary to do it again, so that you remember better, to avoid you not knowing my abilities and arbitrarily defaming me. After Maxwell Gray finished speaking, without giving Elena Rivers a chance to react, he suddenly bowed his head and kissed Elena Rivers. Elena Rivers was stunned by Maxwell Gray's sudden action. When she reacted, Maxwell Gray had already begun to attack the land. Compared to a love playboy like Maxwell Gray, Elena Rivers is just a person who looks mature and charming on the outside, but on the inside is innocent and pure. That bit of her morality, in Maxwell Gray's eyes, is not worth looking at all. By the time Elena Rivers regained consciousness, her piece of soft tofu had been eaten by Maxwell Gray. Maxwell Gray looked at Elena Rivers's red cheeks, his eyes fascinated. Elena Rivers was already beautiful, but at this moment he was kissing her even more passionately, her sparkling eyes, rosy cheeks, that look, extremely charming. She's so adorable that people can't help but want to eat her alive. Maxwell Gray's eyes flashed blue, like a fierce wolf seeing its prey. Elena Rivers was looked at by Maxwell Gray's eyes to the point that her whole body felt uncomfortable. Coupled with something leaning against her waist, Elena Rivers wished she could dig a hole to crawl into the ground. Last time I could use the excuse that I was in a coma and didn't know anything. This time I was clearly awake. Why was I still being kissed by him to the point that I couldn't wake up? I don't know what day it is anymore. Elena Rivers felt like she was too embarrassing. That increasingly hot feeling made Elena Rivers know clearly that she was now very dangerous, that at any moment she could be eaten by this man in front of her. Even though she had no experience, Elena Rivers still knew clearly what the thing was against her waist, and also understood what state Maxwell Gray was in right now. Elena Rivers stiffened and did not dare to move, afraid that moving would stimulate the man who had reached his limit, angering him to his animalistic nature. At that time, the unlucky person would be her. "Let me go." Elena Rivers shouted softly, trying to regain Maxwell Gray's reason. "I like hugging you." Hearing that, Maxwell Gray not only did not let go, but also hugged him tighter. Elena Rivers felt the heat coming from Maxwell Gray's body, felt her body numb, as if there were countless small electric currents running throughout her body. "But I don't like you hugging me. Also, I remind you that you are in your office right now. If your subordinates see you like this, your face as your superiors will lose everything." Elena Rivers glared at Maxwell Gray, hoping the other person could wake up a bit and quickly let her go. In fact, if Elena Rivers gently pushed him, she could make him fall, but she was afraid that she wouldn't be able to control her strength and hurt him. Even though she was upset because he kept touching her too much, she just wanted him to stop, and didn't mean any harm. Unfortunately, the possibility of using an isolation barrier was not possible because the two stood too close to each other, as if there was no distance left. The girl was stubborn, clearly liked it but refused to admit it. "Actually, you don't need to hide your feelings. This is my office, without my permission, no one will dare to enter. You don't need to worry too much." Maxwell Gray teased. "Narcissist. Who wants a hug from you?" Elena Rivers blushed, raised her hand angrily, and directly pushed him away. Maxwell Gray did not expect that such a powerful force would emanate from Elena Rivers, causing him to take more than 10 steps back to be able to neutralize that force and avoid injury. "What are you doing?" He looked at her with complexity, certain that Elena Rivers had not pushed her hand just now, because in order to prevent her from pushing away, he had held her hand tightly in advance. Maxwell Gray looked at Elena Rivers, a complicated feeling welling up. That night, after Owen Donovan treated Elena Rivers, he reminded Maxwell Gray of something important. Elena Rivers's body is different from a normal person's, you need to be careful. At that time, Maxwell Gray didn't think much, just thought that Elena Rivers was a school special physical condition. The world is so big, is there a shortage of people with special qualities, strange, mutated gene point? But witnessing Elena's unusual expressions time and time again Maxwell Gray's thoughts gradually wavered. Seeing his eyes filled with disbelief and anger, Elena Rivers' heart sank. "It's broken, am I about to have my identity revealed?" She thought to herself, silently blaming Maxwell Gray forcing her to the point of using magic power on impulse. It's strange, no matter how alive for many years she did not know what fear was, but now she feels confused when thinking about it. He could tell he was a demon. Trying to keep her face calm, she stubbornly replied, "What are you doing? It's true that I pushed you there. What do you want? Or do you feel embarrassed because your strength is weaker than mine?" Maxwell Gray narrowed his eyes dangerously and looked at her silently. His silence made Elena Rivers feel even more uncomfortable. She couldn't help but swallow. "Even though I try to act tough, I'm actually still stressed." Looking at what? Do you believe in me so strongly, or are you seeing a ghost? Actually, she really met a ghost, because she, Elena Rivers, is almost half a ghost. Think so, she couldn't help but chuckle in her heart. Maxwell Gray still kept his cold eyes and said nothing. Unable to bear the silence, Elena Rivers then said something else. "I do. See why brought me here?" Maxwell Gray frowned in annoyance, unable to understand that nonsense Korean movie. "It has nothing to do with the current situation, and I have no intention of wasting time thinking about it, man, time is very precious." But that reaction made Elena Rivers unable to help but sarcastically say, "What a country girl. Everyone on earth watches it, but you don't. What a loss of face." As soon as she finished speaking, she suddenly realized she had said something wrong, and secretly glanced at Maxwell Gray. Lucky that he didn't notice her slip of the tongue. Elena Rivers is not really human Earth, but a demon from underground. Being called a country bumpkin by her, Maxwell Gray's forehead showed blue veins, his eyes became even more gloomy. The sentence "everyone on Earth watches" made him suddenly understand that she was referring to him Arthalion. You don't know Do Min Jun. Let me tell you a little. Elena Rivers began to speak enthusiastically. Stop. Maxwell Gray interrupted coldly, his voice sharp as a knife. Whatever you want to say, speak frankly. Okay. Elena Rivers replied immediately, I am Elena Rivers, born with a gift, yes, special abilities like Do Min Jun in the movie. I also know how to do magic. Elena Rivers finished speaking, her eyes full of pride, as if waiting for his praise. Maxwell Gray just curled his lips, looking at her with eyes full of contempt as if looking at a person crazy. Obviously, he didn't believe her nonsense and considered it stupidity of a crazy Korean movie fan. Looking at her for a moment, Maxwell Gray just snorted coldly and warned, just this once, stop. If you dare to push me away again, don't blame me for not showing mercy. Having said that, he lifted her chin and squeezed it gently, his expression cold. Elena Rivers immediately pulled his hand away and glared, Hey! I haven't even accounted for the names yet. A scoundrel like you, how dare you come here to warn me? Let me tell you, if you dare touch me again, I will use my special ability to beat you up. From now stay 1 meter away from me, understand? His words accidentally touched a sensitive nerve in her heart. She just angry but also feeling warm and resentful, thinking to himself, obviously he is the one in the wrong before, but I had to explain and wasted time telling him the story again. Hearing her call him a ruffian, Maxwell Gray really wanted to tell her, you're right, is watching too many Korean movies, it's time to go for treatment. But you too, seeing that he couldn't accept that nickname, his face immediately darkened and his eyes turned cold, stared at her. Seeing that his doubts were gone, Elena Rivers was no longer the frustrated Elena Rivers from before, her hot temper rose again, she raised her pretty little chin, and asked fiercely, aren't you what is a scoundrel? I'm so angry. Let this rage burn even more fiercely. Do you think I, this Elena Rivers, am afraid of you? Just when Elena Rivers thought that Maxwell Gray would be so angry that he would strangle her, he sneered, raised his eyebrows, and said. Softly, scoundrels are not scary, what's scary is scoundrels without women. Luckily, I, a scoundrel, have a woman, even more fortunate that my woman is named Elena Rivers. You bastard. Elena Rivers was so angry that her face turned red. Cry. Being teased again. No, she couldn't keep being bullied by him like that, she had to fight back. I'm fucked, I'm proud. Maxwell Gray looked at Elena Rivers ruffling her feathers, felt very amused, and said, a bastard, she dared to call him a bastard, okay, he will show her how miserable he is. With a bang sound, Elena Rivers couldn't hold it in anymore, conveniently picked up the antique vase placed next to her and threw it out, shouting loudly, you bastard, I won't play with you anymore. This damn assistant position, anyone who wants to do it can do it. Since the first day was like that, won't she be bullied and oppressed by him later on? Elena Rivers looks unacceptable, just thinking about it makes her mad. Looking at the broken pieces of porcelain on the floor, Maxwell Gray's face, which was still filled with a smile, was now covered with dark clouds. The dark clouds covering the city are about to collapse, that's all. Is this woman too spendthrift? It was premium Tsinghua porcelain, the most favorite item in his collection, the one he spent tens of millions of yuan to buy. Just bought it less than 2 months ago, and already she broke it. Very good. It's really good. Temperament is also great. I like it. That way there will be a challenge when conquering her, then there will be a feeling of accomplishment, right? If you break my vase, then pay with your body. He also had to thank her for giving him a legitimate reason to keep her by his side. Right? Elena Rivers was inherently a brave person. Even though Maxwell Gray's whole body radiated a storm about to break aura, she was still not afraid and still glared at him. Maxwell Gray slowly raised his head from the ground, looked into Elena Rivers's resilient, fearless eyes, and suddenly a ray of appreciation rose in his heart. In the past, just saying a harsh word from Maxwell Gray was enough to make many people tremble in fear, and a cold look was enough to make women not dare to cry out loud. If the higher-ups in his company saw the way he looked now, they would probably have peed their pants in fear, but this woman still dared to glare at him. "Ha, not bad. You have to be like Maxwell Gray's woman, not afraid of power, that's worthy of you, right?" Thinking that, the anger in Maxwell Gray's heart gradually disappeared, his mood improved, he smirked at Elena Rivers, brushed off the dust on his sleeve, and seemed to accidentally say, "Do you know how much this vase costs?" "Are not." Elena Rivers was stunned by Maxwell Gray's incomprehensible attitude. She temporarily forgot her anger and shook her head stupidly. 80 million yuan. Maxwell Gray held up 8 fingers at Elena Rivers and said, "In other words, Elena Rivers, you owe me 80 million. Now, I order you to pay it back to me within 3 days. Otherwise, take your life, Temple." "What? 80 million? Elena Rivers was stunned for a moment, then rolled her eyes and shouted, "Why don't you go die?" Her entire assets are only 50,000, and she gave it all to him last time. Maxwell Gray was very satisfied with Elena Rivers' reaction, raised his eyebrows in a happy mood, and calmly said, "What? Doubt? I have the bill, miss, do you want to see it? 80 million is 80 million, can't you pay me for bullying me? I'll pay you back tomorrow." Elena Rivers is a strong-willed person, this scoundrel just wants her to pay for it, just dream. She is Elena Rivers, she is a fairy, she is also a lover, 80 million just needs her to wave her hand to make it appear. It's just, she seemed to forget just now, her grandmother said she couldn't use magic to turn money into money, otherwise it would disrupt the order of the world. Maxwell Gray saw Elena Rivers' expression change from energetic to sullen, for the first time feel happy when doubting someone. "Pay tomorrow?" "Yes. I said I'll pay you tomorrow, I'll definitely pay you tomorrow." "Damn scoundrel, you want me to take revenge, don't you dare." Elena Rivers has always been someone who refuses to give up. "Ah, that's right. How could you forget? For Sisters Celeste Lane are not in the same space as maybe she can help you." Thinking of this, Elena Rivers couldn't help but turn around happily and quickly called Celeste Lane in her arms, fourth sister, help me. Please lend me 80 million. Celeste Lane quickly replied, 80 million? What do you want 80 million for? I broke Maxwell Gray's vase, he forced me to pay 80 million. Isn't that right? Elena Rivers, when did you become so wasteful? Can even 80 million sisters break a vase? Hoo, aren't you suddenly angry? Besides, who knew it was worth 80 million? If I knew, even if I beat you to death, I wouldn't beat you. You also know. I just came to this world not long ago, where did I get so much money? Celeste Lane's voice was clearly surprised. Force. So, what about my brother-in-law, is your brother-in-law a rich man? I told him to let me borrow it first. For sisters, tell your brother to save you. Elena Rivers almost cried, she really didn't want to fall into the situation of taking revenge. Hoo. I'm arguing with him to get a divorce. Celeste Lane heard Elena Rivers mention her husband and cried sadly. What happened? Elena Rivers was surprised, both worried for Celeste Lane and sorry for herself. Elena Rivers, beautiful with a beautiful heart, are you jealous of me? No, are you trying to get rid of me? Don't play like this. Hoo, it's nothing, it's just out of character. Celeste Lane didn't intend to say much, Elena Rivers, I'm okay. Really? Elena Rivers helplessly raised her head, rolled her eyes, it's okay, why are you still crying? Fourth sister. Hey girl, have you thought of a way to pay me? I think it's best to compensate with your body, after all, I've already eaten you, eating once is still eating, eating twice, 3 times is also eating, more besides, my technique is so good, you're not losing. Elena Rivers was just about to continue asking, concerned about her sister's life, when Maxwell Gray, who had been waiting too long, patted her shoulder and interrupted. Hearing what he said, Elena Rivers immediately became angry and quickly concluded. End of conversation with Celeste Lane. Turning his head, angrily pushed away Maxwell Gray's hand that was placed on her shoulder, shouting, "Get away from me, I told you to keep a distance of more than 1 meter, right? Did I make you that uncomfortable? Mr. Gray is both talented and brave, and is constantly hated by the same woman. Finally, he can't hold back the anger in his heart, his face is gloomy, as if he could explode at any time. Rage. You, Maxwell Gray, have countless suitors, as long as you speak, you can easily make countless butterflies dance around you. How can we accept Elena Rivers' constant hate? Now he even compensated for the loss of 80 million, but she still doesn't know how to act. Still dare to hate. She did how dare. But you, how can you not be angry? Elena Rivers did not answer immediately, glared at him for a few seconds, then snorted coldly, "If you were me today, you would know how unpleasant you are. Not just unpleasant, but very unpleasant, okay?" Elena Rivers doesn't respect Maxwell Gray at all, these words are so heartbreaking. Elena Rivers thought to herself, I came here to protect you, but I'm not your possession, and I'm not someone you can bully at will. Today, I won't say anything harsh. If I treat you well, then the one who will suffer in the future will be me. Maxwell Gray couldn't help but admit that when Elena Rivers said this, he was really hurt, so his face became even more unsightly. However, he just silently stared at the unyielding Elena Rivers for a moment, then calmly but confidently said, "Elena Rivers, one day, you will willingly accept me." Narcissist. How can I accept you? Can you stop joking? You will. Unable to wait for Maxwell Gray to get angry, Elena Rivers was a bit surprised, but quickly reacted. Thinking about having to pay you 80 million within 3 days, I'll just. Just what? Do you just wish you couldn't pay for it yourself? Looking at Elena Rivers' small, hateful face, Maxwell Gray couldn't help but interject. You bastard. Elena Rivers was once again irritated to the point of ruffling her feathers. Isn't it just 80 million? I'll pay you right now. I really won't do this damn assistant position anymore. After I pay you money for me, we will no longer have any debt. Having finished speaking, Elena Rivers angrily turned around and quickly walked out the office door. At the same time, he silently added in his heart, if possible, after repaying the debt, it would be best for the two of them to never see each other again. Unfortunately, this wish can never be fulfilled, because the grandmother said that protecting this bastard Maxwell Gray is her mission, Elena Rivers. Hey, where are you going? Maxwell Gray did not expect that Elena Rivers would do it, say go and go. He was momentarily stunned. After reacting, he quickly chased after her. Just as Elena Rivers opened the door and took 2 steps out of the office, he grabbed the door. Her hand. Bastard, let go. Elena Rivers glared at Maxwell Gray, gritting her teeth in hatred. Damn. Didn't you tell me to pay? Now I'm going to make money, you won't let me go anymore. In the end, do you still want that 80 million? If you don't want to, just say so soon, it won't bother me anymore. Ha! Following the sound of bastard, dozens of simultaneous deep breaths were heard outside the general manager's office. All the employees were scared by the way Elena Rivers addressed Maxwell Gray, and many people were mourning Elena Rivers. The general manager here is the emperor, high and mighty above, cannot be violated. Even if there is a queen in the main palace, the queen cannot disrespect the emperor even a word, yet this woman, at most just a favored concubine, dares to insult the emperor. So radical. Looks like you're mentally prepared to enter the cold palace. Thinking of this point, of the female employees who were originally mourning Elena Rivers, more than half began to secretly rejoice. They should be secretly happy. If the favored concubine is removed, the emperor will be theirs again. Even if they cannot pursue it openly, they can secretly love it, will not be reluctant, will not be upset. It's just that God likes to tease people, not what people want. Maxwell Gray's next reaction left them in complete despair. Who would have thought that their arrogant, cold, and lonely President Gray not only did not get angry, but also showed a helpless expression of coaxing. Okay, stop making trouble, let's go inside. If you want to come in, go in yourself. I told you I'm not an assistant anymore. As soon as Elena Rivers said these words, she herself did not know that she had caused outrage. More than half of the staff secretly cursed in their hearts, damn, this easy and comfortable assistant position, no matter how many people want to do it, you can't do it, but you don't know how to enjoy it. What's even more hateful is that being noticed by their President Gray is such a lucky thing, but she doesn't know how to appreciate it. Why don't she give this luck to someone else? There are quite a few male employees who have some additional enjoyment for Elena Rivers. Women should naturally have a personality like hers, not men telling them to go wherever they want, doing whatever they're told to do. I don't dare to have the slightest opinion, so what's the difference between a puppet? Although this woman doesn't dress well, she has a lot of personality, like a wild horse. Taming it is a challenge. No wonder Gray will always pay attention to her, not just another person. Among the girls who love guys, there is no opinion here. Come in with me. Maxwell Gray saw that Elena Rivers did not give him any face in front of other employees. Her face immediately sank. She used a commanding tone. Her eyes were extremely sharp, creating an invisible pressure, making people I feel like I can't help but obey. However, Elena Rivers is not a person, she is a lover. How can she listen to him? I only saw Elena Rivers forcefully jerking the arm he grabbed, muttering, "Let go. If you don't let go, how can I pay you 80 million? I want to quickly pay you now, and then leave," lost immediately. Huh. The employee who pricked up his ears and overheard what Elena Rivers said was once again shocked and surprised to the point of not being able to control his voice. Men think like this. She doesn't like Mr. Gray, but Mr. Gray keeps him by his side for 80 million? So what's the difference between forcing women? Mr. Gray is a cunning businessman, he must have plotted against someone else's girl. Sigh, since when did their leader Gray flirt with girls to such a point? It seems like the image has decreased a lot, right? Gray's overall image has dropped to this level. It seems like they will still be single in this life. There is absolutely no hope for life anymore. The path of husband and wife is so dark. Women are both incredulous, angry, and heartbroken. Mr. Gray, why do you have to lower yourself for her? She doesn't need you, isn't there still us? Sir, this is equivalent to compensating for a loss of 80 million. Who is she worth that much? Why don't you choose one of us? We don't need you to compensate, we can compensate for your losses. He's like that. What should we do for those who love us deeply? As soon as Elena Rivers finished speaking, Maxwell Gray's face looked like someone had slapped him hard. But the unbelievable syllables that the employee uttered unintentionally added fuel to the fire. Maxwell Gray felt that he had really lost face and went to his grandmother's house. He was very angry in his heart and of course his face was as black as ink. However, the culprit only worried about yanking his hand away, not paying attention to his face. Maxwell Gray has fire and no outlet. He can only be angry at dogs and cats. His eyes were like a cold and sharp blade, passing through each employee who had just made a sound, now trying to pretend to work, then said in a cold and heartless voice, but not too quickly or too slowly, "The people who just made a noise, this month's bonus was all confiscated. In addition, 10% of their salary was deducted. The reason is, they are not mentally focused during working hours, affecting the work of their superiors. Above, causing serious damage to property and spirit company and superiors." This reason succeeded in making Elena Rivers stop struggling. She couldn't help but curl her mouth and look at Maxwell Gray's black face. Damn, what did you hear? Influence the work of superiors. Are there any property and mental losses? Can you tell this lie too? Don't you feel pressured? What, so shameless? It turns out that the person he oppressed was not only her, but also these employees. At this moment, Elena Rivers felt deep sympathy for the employees who have worked here for a long time. As for the other employees, although they already knew they would be punished, they still showed helpless expressions as if they had been hit by frost. There is a price to pay for gossiping, and this price they still find light. After all, they already know too many secrets of the Emperor, and they are very lucky to not be exterminated. However, Elena Rivers, whose heart was full of justice, could not feel the luck in their hearts. She simply could not see others being bullied for no reason. She looked at the staff with pity. Then defended them with a serious face. Hey, scoundrel Gray, are you a feudal landlord? Yet you exploit your employees like that. They didn't do anything wrong, on what basis do you deduct their salaries? Elena Rivers' words immediately moved the staff to tears. Don't misunderstand, this is not gratitude, but bitter tears, just because they more or less understand the landlord's personality. Me. Dear beauty, you are Bodhisattva, Bodhisattva. But we don't need you to be so kind, Bodhisattva. You spoke up to President Gray for us, do you know that in the end we will be even more miserable? The staff couldn't help but cry in their hearts. Sure enough, Maxwell Gray heard Elena Rivers speak for someone else, his face immediately turned darker than black, enough to squeeze out ink, the aura emanating from him was enough to feed several adorable penguins. Cold eyes stared at Elena Rivers, who still thought she was very righteous and did not know how to repent. I hate you until I grit my teeth. This damn woman, she could care about employees who had only met her once, didn't even know their names, and refused to give him, who once had an intimate relationship with her, a little bit of dignity. Good side. She may be stingy and not give anyone a good look, including him, but he just can't see the unfair treatment. These bastards, stop watching my jokes, why do you get her attention? Based on what? The more Maxwell Gray thought about it, the angrier he became. He held back his anger and wanted to curse, and said coldly, deduct another 10% of your salary, which of you has any opinions? Hey! This guy! How could he be so miserable? Do not have. Just when Elena Rivers stared at Maxwell Gray with unbelievable eyes, wanting to speak up to defend the employee again, the employee refused to accept her kindness, and all at once responded to Maxwell Gray, shaking their heads. Like a drum, what was unimaginable was that on their faces was a look of admiration, even a look of gratitude towards Maxwell Gray. How can you not be grateful? It's better to deduct a little salary than be collectively fired later. Elena Rivers saw that, her mouth opened, and for a moment she couldn't close it, nor could she speak. My heart felt even more pity. To what extent were these people oppressed by the scoundrel Gray? But when you exploit their salaries like that, they still act like such idiots. Must have been fooled by the scoundrel Gray, really. You. Elena Rivers raised her index finger and pointed at those employees, then he pointed at Maxwell Gray with an expressionless face, and for a long time was able to say one sentence, you are all hopeless. Having finished speaking, she shook her head at the staff, her face full of pity and anger. She couldn't help but secretly used magic power to push away Maxwell Gray's hand that was grabbing her arm. I don't care about you guys anymore. Elena Rivers finished speaking and quickly walked towards the elevator. Suddenly angry. What kind of people are these? She, Elena Rivers, had good intentions to help them. They are so unreasonable, it's too much. Stop, it's hard to protect yourself now, so as not to have to pay for it yourself. You should still think of a practical way to earn 80 million, these people if you don't know that, you should still be less careful. Elena Rivers, damn. Maxwell Gray reacted from his stupefied state of looking at his empty hand and hurriedly chased after her. Elena Rivers had already entered the elevator and the elevator door had just closed. Maxwell Gray's face, his black eyebrows stared at the elevator door, as if he wanted to see through it. Everyone thought that Maxwell Gray was angry inside, but Maxwell Gray was worried about Elena Rivers' truly amazing strength. Just now he clearly clenched his fist as a result. As soon as she exploded, she immediately pulled his hand away. How much money does she have, don't you know? I don't know if this stupid woman will sell herself to someone else for these 80 million. No, he couldn't bear to do something stupid like offering her to someone else. Maxwell Gray thought so, quickly walked towards his private elevator, intending to chase her, but, just as he about to enter the elevator, his special assistant, Leon Lark, appeared, and firmly said to Maxwell Gray, "Mr. Gray, the guest you need to see today, Mr. Eric, has arrived and is waiting for you, meeting room." Damned! Maxwell Gray's footsteps stopped because of Leon Lark's words, and he couldn't help but curse in his heart. That stupid woman almost made me forget everything. This morning he struggled to hold back, not to let it flare up, and dragged Elena Rivers to the company, all because of this important guest from New York, Eric. In the end, Maxwell Gray still had a black face, glanced at Leon Lark, and strode back to the office, but when entering the office, he did not forget to tell Leon Lark to tell Elena Rivers that the bodyguards had changed shifts. 80 million, 80 million, 80 million, where should I go to find it? After leaving the Ton Dain group, Elena Rivers was always filled with sadness, and was not even interested in playing cat and mouse with Maxwell Gray's bodyguards. They wanted to follow, and she let them follow. She, who always loved beauty, was in no mood to pay attention to the scrutiny of passers-by on her rustic outfit, walking alone on the street, bowing her head like a defeated rooster. Just thinking about how to earn enough 80 million to pay that bastard Maxwell Gray. Hoo-hoo. I really regret it. Reality shows that anger is truly the devil. In the future, she does not dare to arbitrarily destroy things anymore, otherwise she will get herself into trouble if she is not careless. A passive and frustrating situation like this, she, Elena Rivers, never wanted to face a second time. Money, money. Before, Elena Rivers never expected that one day she would desire money so much and need money so urgently. Elena Rivers walked and thought deeply, her biological clock rang, gurg, gurg. She touched her flat stomach and realized it was lunch time. Having said that eating was a big deal, Elena Rivers decided to put everything aside for now. The most important thing right now was to fill her stomach. When thinking about eating, as a food lover, Elena Rivers immediately became excited, freed from her previous lethargy. Her beautiful little face exuded a brilliant aura, her black eyes sparkled. Light, looks extremely excited. Elena Rivers looked around a bit, finally choosing the high-end Western restaurant across the street. Fate is something that can be wished for but cannot be prayed for. When Elena Rivers walked into the Western restaurant and saw Richard Quinn sitting in the window position on the left, her eyes immediately lit up. Her eyes looking at Richard Quinn had never been hotter. Burned so much. In this moment, Richard Quinn in Elena Rivers' eyes was taller and straighter than ever, handsome and charming. Elena Rivers had never been so happy to know someone like she was right now. Richard Quinn bowed his head to eat and drink elegantly, feeling the hot gaze from the door. At first he thought it was some girl who was fascinated by him, but didn't pay much attention. But when those eyes became more and more hot, the feeling was a little different from before. He couldn't help but raise his head, looked towards the door. With just one look, he was stunned. Although the woman standing at the door was wearing an outdated black outfit, it still could not hide the graceful and sexy curves of her body. She tied her long hair in a high bun, making her beautiful face even more delicate, truly flawlessly beautiful from every angle. What people couldn't miss the most were the eyes looking at him that sparkled like obsidian, filled with excitement and hope. As a love playboy like Gray Mac, Richard Quinn has met countless people, and his heart has not been easily moved for a long time, but seeing Elena Rivers like that, his heart was beating uncontrollably, every time. Thump vibrated, making his chest numb, even worse than a young man just learning to love. When Elena Rivers smiled brightly like a flower and walked towards him, the phone ringing of a brother next to her rang at the right moment. Looking at you, watching you walk forward, my heart jumped, but what should I say, I still haven't thought of it. What a song, Tien Tien Muoi, is suitable for the situation, but isn't Elena Rivers the Tien Tien sister that he is infatuated with? Even though her current outfit was a bit poor, he still felt that she was the most dazzling woman in this restaurant. That's right, just look at the eyes of the people of the same sex around her who are glued to her to know. It's just that their eyes make him a little uncomfortable. Although Richard Quinn appears as gentle as jade, he has one thing in common with the cold gray Mac, which is a very strong possessiveness. When he is unhappy, of course he will step forward and claim sovereignty, not giving other wolves a chance. He arrived in front of Elena Rivers in a few steps, tried to calm his strong heartbeat, smiled gently and said, "Elena Rivers, we are so destined." That's right, that's right. Richard Quinn, it's nice to meet you. Elena Rivers showed unprecedented enthusiasm, smiled brightly, reached out her hands to hold Richard Quinn's hand tightly. Elena Rivers' actions made the men in the restaurant who had some hope for her gloomy. In my heart, I secretly lamented that these days, behind a beautiful woman, there is always a tall, handsome, rich man. They can only stand on the sidelines and watch forever. And Richard Quinn looked at the small, soft, warm hand placed on the back of his hand. He was both happy and touched. He took the initiative to hold Elena Rivers' hand and walked towards his table as he spoke. "Come on, sit down and talk about something else." Who is Richard Quinn? He is the general manager of Hongduong Group. Observing faces has always been his forte. He would not be naive and think that Elena Rivers did this because she liked him. In fact, when Elena Rivers talked, he soon realized that Elena Rivers had come to him for help. Even so, he was only slightly disappointed, then his mood was extremely happy. He feels comforted, at least when in trouble. The person she thinks of asking for help is him, Richard Quinn, and no one else, right? Underscore 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 Eric, named Victor Shaw, Chinese American, is Maxwell Gray's senior at Harvard. The relationship between the two is not very good, but not bad, at least the two admire each other. Victor Shaw is a famous American financial investment advisor. Maxwell Gray intended to bring Tan Dayin into the U.S. market, so he sought his help and learned more about the New York market. Mr. Gray, wanting to enter the American market is not difficult, but without my help, it will definitely be very difficult, so you should be thankful for having a powerful senior like me. In the meeting room, Victor Shaw laughed and joked with Maxwell Gray. If Tan Dayin succeeds in entering New York, Maxwell Gray will definitely not forget the contributions of his senior. Maxwell Gray was cold but still very affectionate, but because he was worried about Elena Rivers, he was not in the mood to talk much with this senior, so he went straight to the point. "Mr. So, please tell me. I know the situation in New York." Victor Shaw raised his eyebrows. "Maxwell Gray, are you in a hurry?" "That's right. What does it have to do with it? Could it make you no longer interested in the job you love?" "Okay," Victor Shaw admits, he's gossiping. Maxwell Gray was just about to say something personal, when his personal cell phone rang. "Excuse me, I'm on the phone for a moment." Having finished speaking, Maxwell Gray did not hesitate and answered the phone right in front of Victor Shaw. However, as soon as he answered the phone for a moment, his face turned dark and scary, then quickly hung up. "Mr. So, I'm really sorry. I told my assistant to arrange a hotel for you. Tonight I will personally go to the hotel to find you. I have to go out now." After speaking, Maxwell Gray hurriedly walked out of the meeting room, leaving only Victor Shaw with a cold back radiating cold air. Oh my God! This guy, is he so mad? Victor Shaw seemed very confused, but still accepted the fact that he was abandoned halfway. While confused, Victor Shaw was also curious, so when Leon Lark came in, he immediately grabbed Leon Lark and asked, "What happened to Mr. Gray?" For Maxwell Gray, isn't career always the most important thing? How many times did he invite him to get him to agree to help, but now that he's arrived, he's been abandoned by this Maxwell Gray guy. As his assistant, why would he look for another male personal assistant? Note, it's your personal assistant, boss. There must be cheating. Victor Shaw firmly affirmed. The corner of Leon Lark's mouth twitched again, looking at the sky. The whole company knew they were having an affair. Did they still need him to confirm? Why does he think Eric is a bit slow? Must be, have you swapped it? Or did he pick up the wrong person? Finally, in order to not be bombarded by Victor Shaw's curious questions, Leon Lark could only say kindly, "Mr. Eric, you have worked hard on the long journey, you must be tired. I will take you to the hotel to rest. If no, Gray will blame me for not entertaining you properly." Victor Shaw saw that Leon Lark spoke with dignity and didn't make things difficult for him anymore. After all, he could still personally ask the main character tonight, right? He was in no hurry. If Maxwell Gray didn't satisfy his curiosity, then don't try to enter the New York market. Victor Shaw smiled coldly in his heart and nodded to let Leon Lark take him to the hotel. At the Western restaurant, after ordering Elena Rivers a portion of her favorite steak, Richard Quinn smiled and asked, "Your eyes tell me that you need my help, right?" Richard Quinn, you really understand other people's ideas very well. Not at all like that scoundrel Gray. Elena Rivers nodded repeatedly to Richard Quinn, while silently scolding Maxwell Gray in her heart. Elena Rivers' innocent face made Richard Quinn laugh. "If you don't mind, you can call me Richard. I think Richard sounds much better than Richard Quinn." "Richard. Aren't you very rich?" "A few trillion, please lend me 80 million. Elena Rivers was also not polite, excitedly grabbed Richard Quinn's hand and got straight to the point. Richard Quinn was a little stunned. "I can lend you the money, but I want to know what you want the 80 million for, okay?" "Really? Richard, you are really much better than that damn Maxwell Gray. You don't know, I broke his vase, he forced me to pay 80 million in compensation within 3 days. If not, then repay with your own body. It's too much, too hateful." After finishing her excitement, Elena Rivers immediately blamed Maxwell Gray. "Respond with your body." Upon hearing these 4 words, Richard Quinn's pupils shrank slightly, then smiled and said to an indignant Elena Rivers, "Now I will write you a check for 80 million. Does Maxwell Gray just want to borrow these 80 million to keep this beauty by his side? Don't say this is the person he is attracted to. Even if Elena Rivers is just his normal friend, he will still lend her money, to keep her from falling into the tiger's mouth. Now, he can't even let Maxwell Gray have his way. Richard Quinn said so. As soon as he finished speaking, he took out a stack of checks from his vest pocket, quickly wrote 100 million on it, then handed it to Elena Rivers, domineeringly said, "Here is 100 million, take it and give it to Mr. Gray, tell him the remaining 20 million I gave him as alms, and tell him he doesn't need to return it." "Why?" Elena Rivers is very heartbroken. "You don't have to give him another 20 million, right? That's 20 million, it's very difficult to earn it back, okay?" Richard Quinn saw Elena Rivers's hesitation, smiled and said, "Don't be sad, even though I give you 100 million, you only need to return 80 million to me, the remaining 20 million will be considered as friends, let me vent my anger." Think about it, Maxwell Gray is such an arrogant person, if you gave him 20 million, what would his expression look like? He will definitely be angry. Quinn seems to care a lot about Mr. Gray. I really appreciate it. Before Elena Rivers could excitedly voice her thoughts, she heard Maxwell Gray's voice coming from afar. Elena Rivers turned around and saw Maxwell Gray walking towards them like a storm. his step steady and carrying invisible pressure. It made Elena Rivers feel like she had done something wrong, but she still stubbornly puffed her chest out, held her head high, and looked at him without giving up. However, Maxwell Gray didn't even look at her, went straight to their table, then picked up the check on the table, glanced at Richard Quinn who was calm, and coldly said, "It's all Quinn. With such a heart, I probably won't care if it's 20 million or 100 million, please admit it. Quinn is really a good, knowledgeable woman. I've been spending wastefully, my finances are tight, especially for giving me living expenses. I'm really grateful to Mr. Quinn." Having said that, he unceremoniously stuffed the check into his vest pocket, safely in his pocket. In fact, when he heard the conversation between them, Maxwell Gray was so angry that he almost couldn't help but rush to tear these two people apart. She was clearly his woman, but she pretended not to want to have a relationship with him. Avoided him like avoiding evil, would rather borrow money from another man, would rather owe someone else such a big favor, and refuse to rely on him, the man she once had a relationship with. Why can't you be angry? He, your rival in the marketplace, already dares to fantasize about your woman, but still wants to teach her to use money to humiliate you. Is it okay to be angry? Do you want to insult me? I, Maxwell Gray, don't mind giving you a few more billions. What does this small paragraph count as? Furthermore, you, Maxwell Gray, have never given a damn about money. No matter how calm Richard Quinn was, faced with Maxwell Gray's brazenness, he still couldn't help but twitch the corner of his mouth, looking at the 100 million that just went into Maxwell Gray's pocket, a dull ache in his heart. He wasn't heartbroken because his money went to Maxwell Gray's pocket, he was heartbroken because that money couldn't help the girl he loved, and even more heartbroken, it seemed like Maxwell Gray wouldn't allow it. She borrowed money from him. Maxwell Gray's scoundrel attitude says it all, doesn't it? Hey! You scoundrel, give me my money back. Elena Rivers was stunned by Gray's words and actions, then reacted, stood up, rushed at Maxwell Gray and grabbed the check from his chest pocket. It's been 1,000 years. Elena Rivers has met shameless people, but Maxwell Gray is absolutely the most shameless person she has met in 1,000 years. Yet she blatantly took the 100 million that Richard Quinn lent her. He's already taken this money, who else can she borrow? Could he be any more obnoxious? Maxwell Gray was not angry at all, on the contrary, he took advantage of the situation and hugged her waist tightly, with his other hand caressing the bridge of Elena Rivers's small nose, smiling fondly and said, "I really have no future, but I'm happy because of this little money," to the point of jumping into my lap. However, I really like it. You. Go away. Come on. Stop making trouble. I don't need you to pay anymore, okay? Come home with me. Just when Elena Rivers couldn't bear the urge to get angry, Maxwell Gray smiled gently, bowed his head and whispered in her ear. Really? Elena Rivers couldn't believe her ears. Is he changing his personality? Yet after cornering her, no one could lend her money, and suddenly forgave her. How could he miss this opportunity? This really doesn't sound like something a profit-minded businessman like Maxwell Gray would do. Trick me for what? I'm not going back. I said I won't be a ghost assistant anymore. Maxwell Gray's concession was not in exchange for Elena Rivers' compromise. Just thinking about being bullied by Maxwell Gray like that in the future made her feel resentful. No matter what, she didn't want to be an assistant again. Either return the favor or continue being an assistant, choose one of the two. At this time, Maxwell Gray's patience was running out, but he still tried to smile gently. I choose to help you, continue to be my assistant, I guarantee I won't do anything dirty to you again in the future. Really? Elena Rivers looked suspicious. Yes. Maxwell Gray nodded and added in his heart, whether doing something wrong or not depends on how you define it. Those who didn't hear the next part thought that Maxwell Gray was very good at coaxing women. One moment his girlfriend was angry to death, and the next moment she was as docile as a kitten, admiring his tricks. Only Richard Quinn sitting next to them heard everything. In his eyes, Maxwell Gray is now the grey wolf that seduced Little Red Riding Hood. Just when he wanted to remind Little Red Riding Hood not to fall into the trap so easily, the Little Red Riding Hood Red was no longer angry, turned to him and said, "Richard, thank you. 80 million, I will pay you. I have something to do, go now." "No need. You didn't borrow 80 million from me. He didn't lend me money, what should I pay him?" Richard Quinn and Maxwell Gray spoke up at the same time. Who would have thought that Elena Rivers did not pay attention to the angry and jealous Maxwell Gray in her heart, but instead smiled at Richard Quinn? "The problem is also solved because of you. You also lost 100 million because of me, paying me 80 million is very reasonable." Maxwell Gray heard her say that, his heart became even more dissatisfied, and at the same time he regretted it too much. Knowing this woman's logic was like this, from the beginning, no matter what he said, he would not accept Richard Quinn's money, he would rather tear it to pieces. It's good now, after all, she still owes Richard Quinn a favor. And you, Maxwell Gray, were the one who directly told her not to pay, but didn't receive any thanks from her, and didn't even have a good look on his face. Yet she smiled so brightly at Richard Quinn. Since when did she smile at him like that? The more Maxwell Gray thought about it, his face became darker. Finally, he didn't bother pretending to be gentle anymore. His face darkened and he pulled Elena Rivers out of the Western restaurant, away from Richard Quinn's sight. Although Elena Rivers was still taken away by Maxwell Gray, Richard Quinn did not feel too much of a defeat. At least looking at Maxwell Gray's angry back, he felt that he had not lost yet. He hasn't lost yet, which means he still has a chance to win, so why should he feel like a failure? He believes that Elena Rivers' temporary departure is just for their better meeting next time. After bringing Elena Rivers home, Maxwell Gray did not do anything else, because he was very busy. As for Elena Rivers, she idly strolled around, visiting each floor of this 100-story building. When tired, she returned to Maxwell Gray's bedroom to sleep and slept until work time. As soon as it was time to get off work, she didn't even say goodbye to Maxwell Gray, so she hurriedly left the company and went back to her small house. Around 9 o'clock in the evening, in a certain luxurious room of the Dachau Hotel, a man wearing a robe, handsome in appearance, with a melancholy face looked at a man in a handsome suit, who was also exceptionally handsome. Sitting next to him, frowning, constantly drinking. After a while, Victor Shaw couldn't bear it anymore, frowned, and said dissatisfied, "I said, Maxwell Gray, you didn't come to me to discuss business matters, but came here to drink temple wine." This guy came to his place for half an hour, just drank in silence for half an hour, despite him asking all kinds of questions, he didn't say a word, curious to death, in the end looking at him like that gave up hope. No longer wanted to know his story. Damn! This guy really knows how to quench his passion. Maxwell Gray seemed not to hear Victor Shaw's words, not to answer a word. Right now, his mind was full of images of Elena Rivers smiling brightly with Richard Quinn. There was also the story of Elena Rivers not seeing him at the company after work, not even calling him, and even leaving him. Falls the bodyguards he sent to watch her. That's right, when she gets off work, the bodyguard will let him know. But, are you that stingy with him? So stingy that you don't even bother to call him? He was really about to be maddened by her ignoring attitude, and even more angry was the fact that he didn't have time to find her to say a few words of reason. The more Maxwell Gray thinks, the angrier and more upset he becomes. After drinking another glass of red wine, I looked up and saw that Victor Shaw had lost his patience. Slowly say, "Let's start." Fuck you. Victor Shaw couldn't help but curse. As soon as he opened his mouth, there was such a cold commanding tone, making him really want to leave him alone. Is that okay? But in the end, thinking about the generous remuneration that Maxwell Gray gave him, he still did not dare to delay and spoke slowly, and seemed to know what to say, without hiding anything. The so-called birds die from eating, people die for money. Please forgive him for losing his personality because of life. In the next few days, Elena Rivers was truly undisturbed by Maxwell Gray and lived very comfortably. Although Elena Rivers has a hot temper, she is still very approachable to those who don't anger her, so in just a few days she got to know everyone in the company. In her free time, Elena Rivers will go everywhere looking for people to talk to, drink coffee or something. After talking enough, he returned to his room to sleep. When he woke up, he closed the bedroom door and diligently cultivated his magic power inside. Maxwell Gray has been really busy these past few days, has a completely indifferent attitude towards her, and doesn't talk to her much. But Maxwell Gray felt that as long as he saw her walking back and forth by his side every day, he would feel at ease. He had never felt so fulfilled in his heart these past few days. This afternoon, Maxwell Gray was busy receiving guests. Elena Rivers was on time to get off work. I want to follow you, you guys are still very young. Elena Rivers, like these past few days, looked at the bodyguard sent by Maxwell Gray to monitor her unwillingly leaving, then withdrew her stealth technique, clapped her hands in contempt, flipped her hair arrogantly, and then hummed while talking. I was going to go get some food, then leave. After 9 o'clock in the evening, Elena Rivers ate and drank to her heart's content, played around to her heart's content, and then went home. As soon as she entered the door, she immediately lay down on the large bed without a trace of womanhood, forming a large, comfortable rectangle, yawning without a trace. Suddenly I wanted to close my eyes and sleep. Just as her eyelids were about to touch, a flash of blue light flashed. Oh my God, can you still let me sleep here? Maxwell Gray, your dignity is too poor. Because of your poor dignity, you are often visited by ghosts and demons. Sooner or later you will be destroyed by them. Stop. Although Elena Rivers muttered so, there was still an unwilling look on her face, but she gathered herself and jumped off the bed. Then, borrowing the bracelet she gave Maxwell Gray, searched for his location. Next, in the blink of an eye, there was no longer a trace of Elena Rivers in the room. Over the past few days, Maxwell Gray has been continuously receiving phone calls from the maid at his private villa, hearing that the girl who was hit by his driver was arranged by him to stay in a villa. As for him, he had fainted several times in recent days and seemed to be getting weaker and weaker. Today, she fainted again and was taken to the hospital. The doctor advised her to stay in the hospital for observation. However, I heard that he had regained consciousness, and these past few days he had been saying that he wanted to see him. A few days ago, he wasn't free and didn't want to pay attention to her, so he still didn't go to that villa. Today he suddenly got excited and wanted to see what tricks that woman was up to. After having dinner with a client, he told Martin Finch to drive to the hospital where she was lying. Arriving at the hospital, Maxwell Gray immediately went straight to the hospital room of the girl who was hit, but he couldn't remember her name. Come in. Maxwell Gray politely knocked on the door twice, then heard a weak female voice from inside. Maxwell Gray coldly pushed the door open and walked in, calmly looking at the woman with a delicate face like a Barbie doll. Her pale face seemed to be about to merge with the white hospital bed, but there was no pity in her heart. Sir, you're here. When she saw Maxwell Gray, the woman's originally innocent, dreamy eyes clearly lit up, but quickly returned to calm. The corners of her lips curled into a moderate smile, neither too enthusiastic nor making people feel uncomfortable. Feel distant. Who is Maxwell Gray? He is the general director of Ton Dyeing Group, a cunning person. How could this woman's strangeness escape his eyes? Maxwell Gray thinks that this is an endlessly greedy woman. She probably keeps asking to meet him, just wanting him to give her money. Even though he despised this type of woman, Maxwell Gray still slowly walked to the hospital bed, placed the fruit basket that Leon Lark gave him on the nightstand, and coldly glanced at the woman whose eyes were increasingly bright. Said, "Tell me, how much do you want?" Unbeknownst to Maxwell Gray, he followed in his footsteps closer. The bracelet under his sleeve emitted an increasingly brighter light. Evangelina White heard Maxwell Gray say that, stunned for a moment, frowned beautifully, and said gently, "Sir, I don't know what you are talking about." Maxwell Gray thought she was playing tricks, because he had met many women of this type. She was not the first, nor would she be the last. If in the past, he had met this kind of beautiful woman, Maxwell Gray would have played with her a little, but for some reason, as soon as this woman looked at him with bright, greedy eyes, blue, his mind quickly flashed the clear black eyes of Elena Rivers. After a little comparison, he immediately felt that this woman's eyes made him really dislike her, even say he was disgusted, and was completely in no mood to play with her anymore. Thus, even the desire to say one more sentence to her was gone. He immediately took out a stack of checks from his vest pocket, held a pen in his right hand, quickly wrote 8 numbers on it, and then coldly handed it to the woman. Evangelina White was a little stunned when she saw his series of actions, but her eyes kept flashing, because she smelled an unusual but clear breath on his body, an unknown scent of divine energy. Or love atmosphere. At first, she thought that this man would at least arrange for her to live in the same villa with him, but unexpectedly he would not return to that villa to stay, and then heard that the maid was there. He said he had never stayed at that villa, making her extremely disappointed. These past few days, she thought of all sorts of ways to ask to see him. Waiting made her extremely miserable, but she finally waited for him. I just didn't expect that just one sniff of his breath could make her more alert. 10 million, not enough. The woman's silence made Maxwell Gray, whose face was paralyzed, couldn't help but frown. 10 million. The woman looked at the check in front of her, stunned for a moment. She could say, hey, don't you know what that check in front of you is? She just wanted to cling to him. But this man seemed to really dislike her, even hate her. She, Evangelina White, was actually hated by a human. Evangelina White swore in her heart that sooner or later she would make him love her so much that he couldn't leave her. Evangelina White's reaction made Maxwell Gray think that she was not satisfied with this amount of money. Without saying a word, she tore up the check for 10 million, then wrote another check for 100 million. However, as soon as he put down the pen, a small white hand was placed on the back of his hand holding the pen, and Evangelina White's gentle voice rang out in his ear, "Sir, I don't know, need this." At first she just couldn't react in time, now she had guessed the effect of this check. However, she doesn't lack money of any kind. As long as she wants, she can have as much as she wants. What she wants is the essence that is both like a fairy and not like a fairy, both like a demon and not like a demon in his body. So what do you want? Looking at that white hand, Maxwell Gray frowned again and withdrew his hand. It's all because this hand is too cold, making him very uncomfortable. I want you. The woman instinctively responded. When Maxwell Gray heard that, his face immediately turned dark. Without even looking at Evangelina White, he turned and left. I want your name. Only then did the woman realize that she was sudden. She quickly sat up, grabbed Maxwell Gray's arm, and smiled awkwardly at him. Maxwell Gray. After Maxwell Gray finished speaking, he avoided her hand again, then coldly said, I still have something to do, go one step ahead. If you change your mind and need compensation, contact me. After Maxwell Gray finished speaking, he took out a business card from his pocket and handed it to Evangelina White. Maxwell Gray, Maxwell Gray. Taking the business card, he muttered Maxwell Gray's name softly. Evangelina White looked towards Maxwell Gray again, and he had already reached the door of the hospital room. Mr. Gray, wait. Evangelina White quickly called him back before Maxwell Gray walked out of the hospital room. Maxwell Gray thought she changed her mind, stopped walking, turned his head 45 degrees, and looked at her with suspicious eyes. Who would have expected to see Evangelina White's sad and gloomy eyes, as if covered in frost, and her beautiful face became even more pale with worry. Mr. Gray, I was wrong just now, I shouldn't have stared at you like that, it was very impolite behavior, but I didn't mean it, I was just too happy. You can come visit me, I'm really happy. Speaking of this, Evangelina White sadly rubbed her teary eyes, then choked up and said, "Actually, I don't want to see you for anything else, I just want to say thank you. Previously I had temporary memory loss, now I remember everything. My name is Evangelina White, I'm an orphan, I've been sick since childhood, often fainting, the hospital didn't diagnose me. I guess my grandmother who raised me never let me go out, so I didn't have any friends, so I secretly went out after a while, the disease relapsed and I fainted car crash. Actually, it wasn't a crash, your car only lightly touched me." Her tearful eyes and looked at Maxwell Gray, her pitiful eyes were like a stray dog that no one needed. No matter how cold Maxwell Gray was, no matter how much he loved flowers and pearls, his heart could not be strong. Floating. Maxwell Gray nodded coldly, shaking the silk scarf in his hand towards her. "Thank you." Hearing that, Evangelina White smiled and wiped her tears and took the silk handkerchief from Maxwell Gray's hand. While wiping her face, she secretly looked at Maxwell Gray coldly and silently, wanting to say it again several times. In the end, Maxwell Gray couldn't help but ask, "What's wrong?" I. Evangelina White looked shy and wanted to say it again. Maxwell Gray frowned slightly, using his eyes to signal her to continue speaking. "I haven't eaten dinner yet, I'm hungry." Evangelina White finished speaking and bowed her head in shame. Maxwell Gray heard his unexpected words, was a little stunned, then kindly asked what she wanted to eat, then took out his phone to call his assistant, telling him to bring food to Evangelina White. After calling, Maxwell Gray immediately wanted to leave, saying, "Miss White, you go lie down and rest first, my assistant will bring you food later, I'll go first." Gone. "I know I shouldn't make things difficult for you, but, Mr. Gray, can you stay with me for a while? I don't want to be alone." Before Maxwell Gray finished speaking, he was interrupted by Evangelina White's pitiful soft voice. Evangelina White couldn't let him go that fast no matter what. She wanted the invisible wound at the hospital couldn't check to heal quickly, so she had to absorb a lot of the energy emanating from his body. Although he did not cause too much injury to her, the reason she was hospitalized was not directly caused by him, but as a responsible man, Maxwell Gray hesitated for a moment and still pulled out a chair to sit down next to the bed. It's just that he was quiet and didn't know what to say to the woman in front of him, so he took a newspaper from the cabinet and flipped through it. Evangelina White was afraid of offending him, so she didn't dare to say much, just lying on her side occasionally stealing 2 glances at Maxwell Gray. While greedily breathing in his vitality, her mind was already full of thoughts. Just being in contact for a short time, breathing the breath on his body, she discovered that she was much more alert. If she could swallow his primordial spirit, or cultivate yin and yang with him. Such a handsome man, she couldn't bear to swallow his primordial spirit, but would rather make him her husband. Maxwell Gray. While flipping through the newspaper, I suddenly felt a cold chill down my spine and at the same time felt his hot eyes. Evangelina White immediately raised his head and glanced at her, discovering that she was looking at him with innocent eyes and gently asked, "Mr. Gray, what's wrong?" "Nothing." "Oh." Quinn thought she was mistaken. It turns out it was Mr. Gray. Mr. Quinn and Mr. Gray are truly destined. When we went to the hospital, we could see Mr. Gray was with the beauty. Before Maxwell Gray could say anything, he was interrupted by the voice from the hospital room door. The owner of this voice is none other than the general director of Hong Duong Company, Richard Quinn, whom he just met a few days ago. "It's a small world, don't you think, Mr. Quinn?" Maxwell Gray replied sarcastically, secretly not wanting to see this person again. As soon as he saw Richard Quinn, he remembered the way he pursued Elena Rivers, making him feel uncomfortable and frustrated. What annoyed him more was Richard Quinn's next statement. He walked up to Maxwell Gray and Evangelina White, his face full of jealousy and mockery. "I admire Mr. Gray for having time to spend with this beauty. I don't have that. I don't know if the person I love right now has it. Do you remember me?" Richard Quinn's meaningful and provocative words made Maxwell Gray's face darken. Isn't the person he loves Elena Rivers? Will Elena Rivers remember him? What is he? If Elena Rivers dares to think of him, he will definitely not let it go. Compared to Maxwell Gray's coldness, Evangelina White on the hospital bed seemed not to hear the hidden tension in the two people's words. She smiled purely and innocently, asked softly, "Mr. Gray, is this your friend? Or not?" Maxwell Gray did not bother to answer. On the contrary, Richard Quinn smiled gently, proactively reached out to Evangelina White and introduced himself. "Hello, I'm Richard Quinn." Evangelina White. She smiled gently, politely shook Richard Quinn's hand and then immediately released it, her intimacy not equal to that of Maxwell Gray. Even though it was just a light touch, Richard Quinn felt surprised at the coldness of her hand. What disease does this woman have? Her hand was as cold as ice, giving him the feeling of touching a smooth block of ice. Richard Quinn actually went to the hospital to visit his grandfather, who was in the hospital for high blood pressure. His grandfather's hospital room was right next to Evangelina White's room, and when he passed through her hospital room door that wasn't closed, he happened to see Maxwell Gray. Having already angered Maxwell Gray a bit, and seeing that neither of them welcomed him warmly, Richard Quinn didn't make himself angry anymore, just said goodbye and left the hospital room. As soon as he stepped out of the hospital, he immediately saw Elena Rivers in a flowing blue dress with flowing black hair walking towards him. Richard, why are you here?" Before he could speak, Elena Rivers saw him, smiled brightly, and quickly walked in front of him. "What about you?" Richard Quinn happily responded with a question. Elena Rivers also did not hide. "Didn't I tell you last time that I need to protect someone? That person is here, so I came." When Richard Quinn heard that, he remembered that the person she was protecting was Maxwell Gray. The joy on his face immediately faded. "I came to visit my grandfather." "Visit Grandpa?" Elena Rivers frowned, looking worried. "What's wrong? Is her expression a bit too serious?" Elena Rivers did not answer. Her face was serious, walking around him, her nose occasionally coming close to sniff. When Richard Quinn couldn't hold back his laughter anymore, Elena Rivers frowned and said solemnly, "There is demonic aura." Phew! Richard Quinn couldn't help but laugh out loud, because her actions were so adorable. Elena Rivers felt helpless when he laughed, but still said seriously, "I'm telling the truth." She paused for a moment then asked, "Did you just meet someone?" "Who to meet?" Besides grandfather, there were only Maxwell Gray and Evangelina White. "Ha! Did Elena Rivers feel the scent of Evangelina White's perfume?" "You're so sensitive, is it because you pay attention?" "Because I noticed it, I said it was demonic energy." This thought made Richard Quinn's smile more radiant, like the light of Apollo shining, so beautiful and ravishing, I don't know how many girls' eyes he attracted. Seeing him smiling so happily, Elena Rivers felt even more helpless. She knew that people didn't believe in monsters, but he really had demonic energy on him. She saw that he was a good person, so she reminded him immediately, but unexpectedly he took it as a joke. Even though she felt helpless, she still couldn't let this matter go. Having lived in the human world, she will not let demons run rampant. "Don't just laugh, tell me quickly, who did you just meet?" Elena Rivers said with a serious face. This demonic aura seems similar to the demonic snake's breath that Maxwell Gray once encountered. Could it be that both of them have encountered this demonic snake? Richard Quinn just smiled, not paying much attention, just a few unimportant people. "It's not important, is it?" "It's very important." "Oh, Maxwell Gray seems to be far away from that demon, there is no danger for now." She was in no hurry, solving Richard Quinn's problem first and thinking about Maxwell Gray later. She definitely had to verify if the person approaching the two was the same demon snake that Big Sister had mentioned. "Okay, Elena Rivers, it's really just a few unimportant people." Richard Quinn reassured her, then looked at the time, saw that it was 10 o'clock at night, and smiled and invited her, "Are you hungry? Come have dinner with me, I will take you out to eat delicious food." Really? Being a glutton, Elena Rivers of course couldn't resist the invitation. Her eyes lit up. She wasn't very hungry, but because of the demonic aura problem on Richard Quinn's body, she decided to go along. However, she was a persistent elf and would not let him change the subject so easily. After a period of constant questioning, Richard Quinn finally confessed who he had met. Since then, Evangelina White began to have a connection with Elena Rivers, and the two demons constantly struggled. Not long after Richard Quinn left, Maxwell Gray also stood up to say goodbye to Evangelina White. Evangelina White looked at his back disappearing behind the door. Her innocent smile immediately turned into a cunning, calculating smile. "Maxwell Gray, hee. Maxwell Gray, the person Evangelina White is aiming for, will not escape my grasp, hee." After hearing Richard Quinn mention Elena Rivers, Maxwell Gray suddenly missed that girl so much that he quickly left Evangelina White's hospital room. However, he did not expect to meet her so quickly. But, what is this? While he was eager to see her, she was smiling happily, walking next to Richard Quinn, chatting and laughing. "Man, I can't stand it." Maxwell Gray radiated a cold aura like from hell, striding quickly. When Elena Rivers was about to get into Richard Quinn's luxury car, he pushed Richard Quinn's hand opening the car door, grabbed Elena Rivers' hand tightly, and pulled her to his side. Me. The sudden action made Elena Rivers almost fall. When she looked up and saw him, she shouted loudly, "Maxwell Gray, are you sick? Let me go. Come with me." Maxwell Gray turned cold, ignored her words, and did not pay attention to Richard Quinn standing next to him. "Why do I have to go with you? Who do you think you are? Let me go." Elena Rivers cannot stand his dominance. It was just a collision. How could he consider her his possession, managing everything? "Maxwell Gray, didn't you hear? Elena Rivers told you to let go." Richard Quinn was also pushed back a few steps by Maxwell Gray's actions. He stepped forward and grabbed Elena Rivers' other hand. His eyes stopped at Maxwell Gray's hand squeezing her arm. His usually gentle face was now anger was also evident. "General Quinn, I advise you to get your dirty hands off." Maxwell Gray coldly glared at Richard Quinn's annoying hand. Two tall, outstanding men, one in a poised suit, his face cold and sharp as ice on the top of Tien's sun, his eyes filled with determination. The other person wore simple clothes, but still exuded a sharp look like a blade ready to be drawn, containing murderous intent. The two kept glaring at each other, neither one willing to give in. The tense atmosphere seemed to explode. Already angry with Maxwell Gray, Elena Rivers froze when she saw the tense situation between the two men, looked at this man then looked at the other, and finally couldn't help but scream at Maxwell Gray, "Let go. No way." Maxwell Gray didn't even look at Elena Rivers, then sarcastically turned to Richard Quinn, "Mr. Quinn, why does a noble person like you like to do things like this to attract good women? Mr. Gray, allow me to remind you that Elena Rivers is a free individual, not your property. Please respect her choice." Richard Quinn is not humble at all, his aura is no less than that of Maxwell Gray. Tisk. Maxwell Gray sneered, "Is someone who always thinks of ways to seduce other people's women worthy of talking about respect?" He did not forget to silently curse in his heart when Richard Quinn continued, "I think this is just Mr. Gray's unilateral thinking. Have you consulted Elena Rivers? Unnecessary. She's mine, that's the truth." Maxwell Gray spoke as if deliberately trying to provoke Richard Quinn, then proudly glanced at Elena Rivers. Elena Rivers was angered by his insinuating words. Without paying attention to the fact that she was wearing a dress, she immediately raised her foot and kicked straight at Maxwell Gray. "You pig! Go and die! Ha! You dare!" Elena Rivers' kick contained magic power, causing Maxwell Gray to be caught off guard and fall backwards to the ground. Mr. Gray, are you okay? The bodyguards who were always following closely behind immediately gathered and helped Maxwell Gray up. Richard, let's go. Elena Rivers frowned, without even glancing at Maxwell Gray. She got into Richard Quinn's car first. Richard Quinn nodded, looked at Maxwell Gray who was brushing off his bodyguard's hands and standing up himself, then curled his lips and smiled provocatively. If you dare to go with him, you will surely die. Maxwell Gray shouted angrily. Responding to him was only car smoke. When Richard Quinn started the engine, Elena Rivers took action to prove that she was not afraid of anything. Mr. Gray, are you okay? A new bodyguard came to inquire. Fuck off. Chase Richard Quinn's car. Maxwell Gray's face was black as ink and he shouted at his bodyguard. The bodyguard had to keep quiet and took the car to chase. Pop. Maxwell Gray punched the lamppost next to him hard, not knowing where to vent his anger. The image of Elena Rivers leaving with Richard Quinn kept appearing in his mind, making him unable to control his anger and the dull pain in his heart. Men can endure anything, but losing face in front of a rival is unforgivable. Elena Rivers had given him a slap to his self-esteem in front of Richard Quinn, humiliating him beyond words. The more he thought about it, the angrier he got, the darker his face became, and he punched the lamppost harder. But it seems that the anger in my heart has not subsided but is burning fiercely more intense. The image of Elena Rivers smiling gently at Richard Quinn drove him crazy. He couldn't stand her being with Richard Quinn. Mr. Gray, should we follow? When Maxwell Gray was about to call the driver to bring the car over, the driver understood and drove in front of him. Maxwell Gray, with a black face, reached out to open the car door, but before he could touch the handle, a weak voice rang out, Mr. Gray. He turned around and saw Evangelina White in a hospital gown, standing a few steps away, breathing heavily as if she had just run a long distance. Her normally pale face turned red from the exercise, making her look fragile as if she only needed a gust of wind to collapse. The sight of such a weak beauty could arouse pity in others, but to the upset Maxwell Gray, he only frowned. Why are you down here? What he means is, you often faint, why are you running out here? Don't want to bother others? But when Evangelina White heard that, she felt happy in her heart, thinking that Maxwell Gray was taking care of her. She regained her breath, looked at him with worried eyes, slowly approached, then without hesitation took his hand, frowning and reproaching, Mr. Gray, why do you hurt yourself for someone like that, position? Is it worth it? Her words made Maxwell Gray feel even more embarrassed. It turns out that even a patient on the third floor like her saw herself falling backwards. Maxwell Gray's face turned even darker, frowned at Evangelina White, withdrew his hand from her cold hand, and coldly said, what kind of person is such a person? For some reason, what upset him was not the fact that she witnessed his loss of face, but her disdain for Elena Rivers. Evangelina White heard his cold question but was not afraid, on the contrary, glanced at him with pitying eyes, then emphasized each word, Mr. Gray, don't you understand? She is hot-tempered, rude, disrespectful, and doesn't pay any attention to you. Yet you still want to protect someone like that? Every word she said made Maxwell Gray's face darker. By the time she finished speaking, he exuded a cold aura as if freezing the whole space. Miss Bach, women who talk too much are very unpleasant, don't you know? No matter how many flaws she has, it's not your turn to judge. Even though she doesn't put him in his heart, he still wants to protect her. Hearing that, Evangelina White's face flashed with sadness, tears welling up, her voice choked up, Mr. Gray, I just care about you and feel sorry for you. Am I wrong? Maxwell Gray looked at her for a moment, thinking. It's true that she's just caring about herself, there's nothing wrong with that. But, isn't this concern a bit meaningless? He and she are not close at all. But her expression was so sincere that he didn't think she was acting. My business doesn't need anyone's attention. Maxwell Gray's voice was less cold, but still caring. There weren't many people in the world who truly cared for him, he didn't want to hurt her. Sorry, looks like Vu Gray took care of nothing. Evangelina White turned around to leave, but before leaving, she turned back and instructed, remember to treat the wound on your hand. Having finished speaking, she turned away, leaving behind a disappointed and sad figure, but on her invisible face, an expression of anger appeared, containing patience. In her heart she screamed, this man is really unreasonable. She tried to show concern, but he still blamed her for worrying about money. This was the first time in over 1,000 years that she had encountered rejection like this. But Evangelina White told herself there was no need to rush. She will find a way to separate Maxwell Gray from Elena Rivers and pull him to her side. As she observed clearly from upstairs, Elena Rivers was clearly not an ordinary person. If she hadn't used magic, she wouldn't have been able to escape Maxwell Gray's grasp and cause him to fall backwards like that. Although Evangelina White does not know the identity of Elena Rivers, she can confirm that Elena Rivers is a person with high magical power, perhaps she herself is not yet her opponent. Therefore, she could not let Elena Rivers near Maxwell Gray, otherwise her plan would not work. It's also for this reason that after Elena Rivers left, she immediately went down to talk to Maxwell Gray, so that he would realize Elena Rivers' flaws, and stay away from her. She hoped that, gradually, he would cut off all ties with Elena Rivers. In her heart, Evangelina White silently calculated the next step, telling herself that as long as she persevered, one day she would make Maxwell Gray return to her side. Time is still long, she has enough patience to wait and gradually separate the two of them. But what Evangelina White did not expect was that Maxwell Gray had such deep feelings for Elena Rivers. If she wanted to separate the two, she would have to spend more effort. However, now she needs to know how to stop and not cause more resentment towards him. She patiently waited, waiting for the day he would fit in the palm of her hand. Meanwhile, Elena Rivers suddenly asked Richard Quinn to turn the car back, even though he had gone some distance. Elena Rivers, why do you suddenly want to come back? Richard Quinn turned around but couldn't hide his curiosity.